About an hour ago, I was sitting in my hotel room just making some last-minute adjustments to my slides for the keynote tomorrow morning. And I got this little buzz on my phone. And they said, oh, Anne-Marie, we'll take you up on your offer of swapping the keynote for tonight. So there's nothing like a last-minute change to get the adrenaline going. Eleanor Roosevelt says do something that scares you every day or something like that. And I think this safely puts that into that bucket. Okay, so my name's Anne-Marie Charrett. And I'm a recovering software tester. It's true. I've been a software tester for about 20 years. Or more, probably more actually. And every time I try and stop software testing, I can't. I just keep having to do software testing. The curiosity just gets to me. And every time I promise to stop, I find myself probing and pulling software apart. Yeah, it's just a real challenge. But recently, things have changed a little bit. And I put it down to buying a new car. I've never had a new car before. I only bought it recently. It's kind of really exciting. The last one I had was, I think it was 2000. It was made in 2000. And the only reason we sold it was some drunk person crashed into the back of it. So we finally decided, oh, maybe it's time to get a new car. So having a new car was really exciting for us. And I was driving in this said new car down the road, and it started to get dark. And as it was getting dark, something wonderful happened. The lights went on by themselves. I was like, what? This is amazing. How wonderful. Technology at its best. It does lots of other cool things like heated seats and stuff. Not that you really need those in Sydney, but you know, they're there just in case. But this Maestro technology. I was told this was working. Never mind, I can improvise. No, I can't.
Let's give it a shot.
Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Right. Now, so the reason why, this was a wonderful thing, these headlights going, and I don't know if anyone here has heard about this analogy. It's quite an old one. It's about how software testing are the headlights of the project, right? Because we shine a light we shine a light providing information to everyone else in the project. And it's kind of what we do. So when it's dark, it's great to have a set of headlights to be able to see where we're going. And we like in software testing, we do the same thing. So I was thinking about this a little bit in my new car, and I was thinking, well, hang on a second. Well, if these headlights are going on by themselves, where does that leave us in software testing? Are we needed anymore? And I thought about it a bit more, and I thought, well, hang on a second. What happens? Let's see if this works. Yay! I got to thinking a bit more, and I said, well, what happens if you had a flat tire in the car? How useful would headlights be then? Can't move anywhere. And what happens if you don't know how to drive? What happens if you've run out of petrol? Or what happens if you don't know where you're going? And so I got thinking about this. And before somebody goes, oh, but I'm an exploratory tester, I don't need to know where I'm going. That's part of the journey. It's about discovering the unknown unknowns, right? It's about exploring and finding out the new things. Now, I'm an exploratory tester too, so I think that's a pretty cool thing to do. But just imagine you're in a taxi. And maybe you've been on a long journey, like you're going to Australia, right? And you get on a plane, It's 28 hours in a plane, right? And you're tired, you're grumpy, and you're a little bit smelly. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, you get into the car, and you jump into the taxi and say, can you please just take me home? It's 100 kilometers, but just take me home. And so the guy goes in and says, yeah, I'll take you home, but just do you mind if I go on this alternate route? Do you mind? I have never been this way before, and I want to kind of understand what it's like going there. And we might find some new information about a quicker way. And we might find some information that will help you later on. And it will really build up my mental model of, this journey. I don't know about you, but I think I'd be pretty upset. So having a journey and knowing the destination when you're knowing where you're going is kind of important to people, especially when you're the one paying the bill. Right. So putting this all together and going back to software testing, I like to think of software testing really gives us the location at one point in time. But quality is a bit like a GPS. It's telling us how far we have to go. And I want to really make this distinction today because I think so often we mix up quality and testing together. I mean, even if you think about the terms test, QA, tester, we kind of interchange those quite frequently. And we do it sort of without that much bother. And we thought, oh yeah, maybe I'm a tester, but someone calls me a QA, that's okay too. But I think if you think this is kind of important because when we think about today, we're looking at the situation where now quality is everyone's responsibility. Woohoo! Finally! Finally, we're no longer the gatekeepers of quality. It's fantastic. But what I see what's happening is rather that, yes, quality is everyone's responsibility, but that's getting translated into everybody does testing, right? Well, hang on a second. Are those two things really the same? And that maybe, we look at how, if quality is everyone's responsibility, how do we improve quality? We'll just do more testing, right? Or we'll automate the testing. So I want us to spend a bit of time today thinking about parsing those two things. Let's deconstruct quality a little bit. My favorite definition of quality is the Gerry Weinberg one. He talks about quality is value to some person. And I like this definition because for me, it really highlights the subjectivity of quality. It really brings the thing that it's really about who quality is for. So, for example, what you might think is a wonderful thing, right? Somebody else might not, right? So quality is about value to some person who matters, right? I had to chuck this one in because Baz is having a severe case of FOMO for not being here at the moment. But he chucked this up on Twitter the other day. And do you know how many testers liked this in about 5 minutes? It was amazing. So, I think that everyone has a different sense of what value. And that changes over time as well, doesn't it? If you think about what we valued as a mobile phone in 1988 is very, very different to what we would value as a mobile phone today. So quality is constantly changing depending on who we talk to and depending on what time or even what phase of the project. I mean, I've been in situations where we've said something is a bug at the start of the project. Yes, that's definitely a Sev 2. And then we're just about to release, that might be Sev 3. What do you think? Right? So our understanding, we know how we view quality is kind of changes as we go, depending on the circumstances. And, this is a quote by John Cutler, because John Cutler really has an emphasis on what is it that the business value? What about the business? What do they concern themselves about? And he gives this great post about how, often we as developers and testers, we're fixated on the definition of done. So is it done? But really, is that the question we should be asking ourselves? Maybe the question should be, how has it offered value? How has it offered value to our business? If you think of things in terms of, has it earned revenue? Has this feature given us the revenue we wanted? Or at least has it retained revenue? Or how are we going at reducing cost? How is that feature helping us in that aspect? And I just wonder, for us as in the quality space, how are we viewing these things? How are we measuring quality in terms of what our business value, or whether, we're looking at it purely from the product perspective? So, a while ago somebody wrote, I can't remember the name, probably should have researched this a bit more, wrote a book called Who Moved My Cheese? And I think this kind of has an analogy for us today, because really we are looking, I look at how technology has changed, and how our complexity of technology has changed how a lot of people view deployment. You go to any business and the talk is about speed to market, right? Everything's about speed to market. We need to get out rapidly. We need to respond to market demands. And yet we, in the testing industry, the quality industry, we've been taught about this iron triangle. And that quality, if we want to have good quality, it's going to come, and if we reduce time, it's going to come at the cost of quality. But I think we're kind of missing something here. And I think things have changed, because I see speed to market as a new quality attribute. I see it something that we as testers should be saying, how can we help our organizations get speed to market? How can we help them look at things that they really value? What is it about the build times how can we help reduce build times? How can we help remove waste? I look at exploratory testers. One of the amazing things that we in exploratory testing have done is we've removed a lot of waste in the testing process, haven't we? We've got rid of those whole really heavy documentation. We've said, look, let's focus on value. Let's focus on what the risk is. Let's focus on what really matters and take away the rest and focus on delivering that. How about if we took that mentality into other aspects of delivery? How about we help people remove waste? The other things that I see are changing, what I call the new quality attributes. I think I see emphasis on security and performance and usability. These are really things that our businesses are starting to become very concerned about. But, other things we could be looking at is, what about our story splitting? How about the quality of story splitting, and how is that going? And so starting to think about, well, where is the risk in deployment? Not only just the product, but in our delivery process, in our infrastructure, in our test environments. Where are the risks there? And how can we, as people in the quality space who are fantastic at identifying risk and doing experiments and providing empirical data, how can we provide that to those risks? And what can we do? One of the great things that I love about Elizabeth Hendrickson is she wrote, every time I give a talk I have to mention this, she has this great post about recovery over perfection. She talks about how, rather than trying to get a perfect release out there, maybe we should be focusing on our ability to recover from a problem. Now, obviously, that's contextual. I please anyone who's testing in the pacemaker area, do not put your poor patients on a treadmill and see what happens. But I think that, our ability to recover, are we measuring that? Are we measuring how fast it does take us to recover from that? And maybe we could be looking at, is that trending in the right direction? Are we gradually reducing the time it takes for us to be able to fix a bug and redeploy? So I've been working on a little thing called quality engineering, trying to look at this. And this really hit me. One of the things that this has come from is experience. I was head of engineering at a payments company, where I saw that we had testers who were working in embedded teams, but really the real problems weren't necessarily only in the teams. Sometimes because people were so focused on working in the teams, we were missing system risks. And I thought, well, hang on a second. With the complexity of software these days, with the complexity of infrastructure, maybe these are the sorts of things where we could be really adding value. So some of the things that I thought about was obviously the product. And we don't want to forget the product's really important. Our consumers really care about that. But what about the pipeline? What about our infrastructure? What about our test environments, our test data, things like that? What about our process? What waste can we remove in there? And our practices, right? Are we doing meetings that are not very valuable, and questioning those, and people's happiness within teams, and also the skill set of people. You know, how skilled are we in what we're doing, and can we help in training and coaching in those areas to help improve that? All right, so I think, you know, you might sort of be thinking all about this and be thinking, oh my goodness, there's absolutely, I'm getting out. No wonder she wants to get out of testing. There's no room for me anymore. But, you know, I really believe that there is a massive room for us in the future. But we need to kind of shift our focus a little bit and maybe adapt to how the industry is changing, to how technology is now so cheap, hardware is so cheap that it's cheap to be able to perform some of these experiments. And it's okay to be doing that. So I like to see the idea of a quality practice. And a quality practice might be not necessarily just someone in the quality space. It could be developers, right, who are working but are passionate about quality in code and passionate about improving the quality of their code. Or people in Devops space, passionate about improving and automating and improving their automation. And people in operations. So pulling all these different types of areas, but people who are focused and passionate about quality. And I think what I've noticed is that more and more when we look at industry and people get experience in their industries, that they become, you get 10 years of development under your space, you start understanding the value of quality, right? You start understanding the value of clean code and readable code. So taking those things that people are passionate about and using that to help improve quality overall. I think that people are passionate about quality, but quality means something different to them as it might mean to you. And that's something that we all need to respect and appreciate and work with, rather than coming in and saying, no, I'm the quality expert. This is what quality is, and thou shalt listen to me, and I am the one to deliver the strategy, right? I think those days are over. I think it's starting to move into this place where we are helping others all together to develop the quality strategy, and their input and what they believe needs to be done is as valuable as what we deliver. So I think we also can focus a lot on quality improvement. We can look at ways in which, we can help look at ways in which we can improve quality over teams. Now, I am old enough to have worked in the days where ISO 9001 existed, and I have actually worked in organizations where we've had to do stuff like that. And it's pretty horrible, right? So I know that a lot of people think of quality improvement and we immediately go to that space where it talks about a process that you put over people. I'm not thinking of something like that. Those processes were usually created by somebody outside in a different department. They would spend hours in a dusty room in the corner coming up with ways and methodologies and templates that everybody had to adhere to. And we all had to take meeting notes every meeting. Can you imagine taking meeting notes at every meeting these days? My mind blows. But that this was really, really important. So And it was really important to be seen to be following the process. The process was king. What I'd like to see is, and when I've worked with teams, is to really understand what quality means for that team. Really understand, well, what are the things that are concerned? What is quality for you? What is concerning? What are your threats to quality? What can we do to work on those? So we're working very much in a contextual situation where we're providing what quality is for a team or whoever you're working with. The other thing that's really important is that these people have autonomy over how it works, right? Because you cannot give people the responsibility of quality without giving them the autonomy to go and help them change it. That's just not fair. That's like putting us as the gatekeepers, right? So where we're in charge of quality, but hey, we don't have any power of the budget, or we don't have any control over, how much time we have in being able to deploy, and we can't force developers to fix bugs, but we're still responsible for quality, hey? Woohoo! So yeah, we want to give people autonomy over the decisions of what experiments, what tests they can run, and running little trials to see whether the ideas are working and to get some feedback into those. So design, have an idea about, well, I think this is a problem. I think we have a problem, say, in the performance area, and this is really concerning us. We feel like we don't really understand what our performance is. We think it might be a problem. So rather than looking at that from a huge, massive test that will take 6 months to set up, in a test environment and test data, is think about how we could run little tests to provide some information that we can provide to the team to help them then move on to making a new decision. So we're gradually chipping away at quality rather than trying to provide one massive solution to that quality potential threat. And I think this is a lot more effective because people can gradually see a rapid information. But it also helps because it allows you to adapt your strategy based on the information you've got from your first test. The other thing is that we want to see that information. We want to see a trending. We don't necessarily want to see quality at one point in time. I don't think that's very useful to anyone. It's like, yes, now we have quality. All good. Let's all go down to the pub, right? What we want to do is we want to think about over time, are we trending in the right direction? Is that the sort of way we're going? Are we heading where we want to be? This is one of the things that I worked on, is this concept of a quality workshop. So one of the things that everyone goes, you go to an organization and say, quality is everyone's responsibility. Do you agree? Yes, quality is everyone's responsibility. And then it's like, well, what is quality? And then there's silence. Nobody really has talked about what quality means to them within the team. And so that what happens is what you're thinking of quality and what they're thinking of quality might be different things. So I devised this workshop where you have this ability to bring people together to have a discussion on what is quality and what is important. And what we did is that we created, I basically put a whole heap of quality attributes on the wall. And I had people coming from security area, from performance. This was a large enterprise organization. And they came from all different aspects of the project. And I invited them to come along. And they went through and looked at all the quality attributes. And I had spare white blank cards to see if people wanted to add different ones. So we put those up on the wall. And then we voted on which ones people felt was the most important. And once we did that, we actually got down to the top 3. And we put the top 3 on a whiteboard. And then we asked people to actually think about what would be the first step that you would take in order to be able to move in this direction. So really making it specific and tangible so that people could walk out of that workshop not with this kind of airy-fairy quality thingy-jingy thing, right? We're talking with engineers here that need something concrete and factual and something that they can actually work on, so they feel that this is actually delivering some value to them. And this proved to be really effective and really helpful to many of the people. And it was quite interesting to see the different discussions. And for you as a quality person, it helps just to see the differences of opinions of people and the potential conflicts that might be coming out that you might be facing ahead in the future. I came up with this new term, because that's what I do. Qualitybility. And I kind of got the idea for, you know, like we have testability, and testability is about how easy or hard something is to test. And I thought, well, hang on a second, no one talks about that in terms of quality. I want to talk about that in terms of quality. How easy or hard it is to know the state of quality at any point in time of a system. So let's talk about qualitybility. And that's where I came up with this idea. Because one of the things that I started realizing when we start more and more in this space was that quality is really, really hard to see and understand and know, isn't it? I mean, that's why we have quality attributes in the first place. Because quality is very kind of subjective and hard to define, we talk about quality attributes because at least we can measure those and we can test those. So, but generally, how can we see quality? And how good are we making that easy? How good are our organizations making that visible? Because we can't expect testing to be the only thing that does that. If we're really concerned about going speed to market, testing is not we're going to have to split down the problem into lots and lots of different areas. It's not fair to lump the whole quality problem on the thing that just shines information on the state of quality, right? We need to be looking at other things like writing better code, doing better unit testing, speeding up builds, all these different areas that we want, isolating components and things like that. So being able to measure that in our systems starts to become really important. Some of the things I worked on when I was working the head of engineering was trying to make visible, quality visible in a fun way. Because there is nothing worse than getting a test report, honestly. This dry document, and everyone's like, really, do I have to read that? Right? So, people tend to just read the summary. So how can we make this quality or the state of quality visible that's very easily digestible for people so they can immediately see where the state of quality is at? And to help them do this, I really believe that looking at UX people to come in and help a lot with this, it's easier for developers to be able to visualize what they do. They've got code, you can see code. Yes, that person's doing something. Testing, quality, not sure what that is, it's kind of fuzzy, right? So how can we make that easier to see? Using UX people to help create some really nice visuals will help. So make quality improvement visible too. Start from the start. I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is because I got really bitten badly by it. As I said, I was head of engineering, and one of the things that happened was we were doing a lot of exploratory testing in there. So all the developers were responsible for automation. They did an amazing job. And so they were doing all the automation. And so we had these testers who were looking at exploratory testing within the teams. And we never really, because of the type of company it was, we never really had a need to provide a report to someone. People were like, well, you're doing a good job. As long as you're doing a good job, that's fine. But we were talking to people in IT, right, in the tech area. That's not the same for people working in sales and finance and marketing. And they're used to their traditional test cases. And they're used to their traditional something to see the state of quality. And I can tell you for one thing, if you do not provide them with something, they will take their own version and provide it for themselves. So if you think about the finance person, he's going to think of quality in terms of finance and cost and budget. So I think it's on us to help these people think about and visualize quality right from the start. Don't wait to the end. Have the conversations right from the start about how are we going to make this visible to you? What are you looking for? And tracking quality improvement over time, I think, is one great way of helping people get a sense that, oh yes, we're moving in the right direction. We might not be perfect right now, but I can see how this is going, and I can see how this is improving our business outcomes, right? I see this is improving our revenue. Another aspect that is worth talking about is the coaching. And I'm a big believer in coaching and helping others become skilled at what they do rather than attempting to do everything themselves. There's a great satisfaction in testing. You know, you're actually doing something. It's very tangible. It feels great. Well, it does for me anyway. I love it. But helping others to be able to do that, really it facilitates skill across a lot of different areas. And more and more, I look at coaching as the way to help people become better at what they do. I want to go back and finish that then. So one of the things that we did at one organization was to actually look at bringing in a quality engineering team. And we brought the team, and all the team were not actually people who are doing things, they were coaches. So we had a developer coach come in to help the developers become better at writing unit tests and writing clean code. We had a Devops coach help them with the infrastructure. So, and helping them get a very basic CI/CD structure up, which helped them then which they could learn the basic skills in order to be able to go and then share those skills with other people. So providing the teams with the skills that they need to be able to get their job done rather than doing that job for those people. Now I'll get on to swarming. So swarming is something that you might have heard about in other organizations. I didn't realize it was a thing. I just kind of made sense to me that, you know, oh look, we had a potential threat in security. So we rounded all the testers who were available, we made a team, and we started doing some testing in that space. And we started, we kind of had this hit squad of testers who focused on a threat at one point in time. And then what we would do is we would collect enough evidence to provide to the rest of the engineering teams to be able to say, yes, we think this is a problem, or we know this is not quite as big as a problem as we thought. So we were the people who basically enabled other projects to get kick-started because we could provide actual empirical data to see whether there was a potential problem there or not. And that proved to be really effective in the performance area and in some of the security. We had some security issues that we actually targeted. We did some amazing testing in a really short space of time that enabled us to do that. So swarming is quite an effective way of targeting a risk at any one point in time. Don't feel that your testers have to stay within teams. I think it's fantastic they can think about risk at a systems level. This is my little boy. Well, I had to put this picture up because it's such an old photograph. But when he was little, I got this bunch of flowers. I think my husband gave it to me, but they were dried flowers. And they had been dyed, you know, you can see that red and blue and these different colors. I don't know, I think it's an Australian thing, I'm not sure. But anyway, he picked up this bunch of flowers. They were just lying on the table. He picked them up and he went out into the back garden and he started planting them into the garden. And it was really cute. But I think that this hit me a lot. I went to a talk once at Agile Australia, and I think it was the guy who talked about turning the boat around, turning the ship around. Anyway, he was talking about how enabling people to do the job rather than doing the job yourself. And this is really, I'm a passionate believer of providing space for people to breathe and grow. So enabling people to have that space, and if there's any test managers there or leaders in that space, is giving people the space in order to be able to grow and learn. So you provide the environment where people can thrive. And I think this is one of the big things that we can do in helping other people as well, not just testers, but helping other people within the quality space. So diversification, finally, I think we really, one of the big things I found was valuable is to be able to diversify what quality is. So thinking about quality in all those different aspects, the product, the process, the pipeline, people, all those different areas. But also think about solutions, breaking down those solutions, breaking down a solution into lots of small solutions and targeting each solution with a small experiment and gradually building up information to be able to target a challenge. The chances are the big problem will disappear into something else anyway. So investing all that time into creating big projects on performance really is, I think, quite questionable. Diversity of skill sets. We talk a lot about technical testing. We talk a lot about automation in our industry. I'm a firm believer that one of the big risks out there is that we're not helping business process enough. And I think this focus on the technical aspects is opening up a risk in the business areas. And one of the things that we experimented was you getting testers who had a very strong domain knowledge in that space, and they literally went down and sat with business people, getting to know them and creating a relationship with these people so that they would go out to lunch and get to know them. And really, they knew them so well that they could have this discussion about what quality meant to them. One of the things that they experimented was actually having demos. So we're used to, the agile team at the end of an iteration, we sit down and the business come up and they give the demo and da-da-da. But we turned it around. So the demo, we had actually the business person, we all went down to the business people to have a look and demo. They demoed what they did during the day rather than the other way around. And that was driven by these business process testers who are focused in that domain knowledge, and they could see that there was a need there for us to cross that bridge. So, just to round up everything, because there was a lot in there, really I'd like to kind of put it in together in this one sentence. We absolutely need software testing, and yes, software testing is I struggle with this, the headlights. But I like to think of quality as the journey. And the way we know whether we've got to our destination is by focusing on business outcome, right? Understanding what business is understanding what outcomes are needed for our business and targeting our quality to that area. Thank you very much. We have time for questions, so if anybody wants some questions.
So question assurance is in the works.
It still hovers somewhere between the thoughts, and I still have to think about that. So my question is about quality over time. You mentioned about trending and measuring it, and as a journey, what I have experienced is that quality is never like a linear line going up or down. Usually there is like a small change, then the quality improves a little bit. When there is a major release, it goes down quite hard and then starts to rise up again. So how do you measure it over time? What's the trend when it jumps up and down all the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess to some degree, it's not necessarily about over time. What is your time frame, right? And where are you heading? Do you have a clear vision, or does your organization have a clear vision of where they want to be? So, yes, we're talking about product, but we're not only talking about product quality here. We're talking about quality in terms of business outcome as well. So, how can we show that our revenues are increasing or or retaining revenue is one of the things. But also, over time, yes, our quality might dip at a release, but over time, are we getting to the right place? So maybe what we're looking at in the time frame of 3 months might be too short if we know that there's a trend. If the quality dips after release, and that's okay, I mean, that's one of the questions you have to ask is, are we okay with that? Or is there something that we can do about that quality dropping at that point in time? So it's not necessarily that we want this beautiful linear line, but I think we need to have a clear understanding of where we're going and that we want to see it improving in some way. I mean, typically, I don't know, quality is a bit like this, right? Yeah, which is a great point.
So what do you put on the line? What is the line about? What do you measure?
Well, it depends what you want what quality is to you, who you're talking to, right?
Maybe you can bring some examples.
Put me on the spot, why don't you? Well, I think about quality improvement, right? If you think about, having a team, we had teams who were looking at, for example, end-to-end testing, right? So speed to market, one of the things they wanted to do was reduce the time it took to release a product. So at the time, it was taking 5 days to do end-to-end testing, right? And I mean, if you're talking about trying to move to fortnightly iterations, clearly that's going to be a problem. So one of the things is, okay, well, what do we do about that? Do we just chuck out all the end-to-end testing, which is actually what I suggested, but how do we break that problem down into lots of different things? So one of the things that the organization was looking at as well, clearly we need to be faster in our end-to-end testing. And I'm like, well, that's one possible solution. But how about you look at how the developers are doing unit testing? What about making the state of quality visible at that point in time when the developers are writing their code? How can you make that information more visible rather than waiting right to the end for end-to-end testing to tell you about the state of quality, right? So maybe we need to make that information more visible earlier so our dependency on the end-to-end testing doesn't have to be quite as serious, right? And that way we can reduce that impact on quality at such a late notice, which everyone hated. So potentially that's one way we could do that.
Yeah.
Hi, I was thinking of, you said measuring and making things visible, and at one point you said get the help of UX people to show the result of testing and make quality improvements visible. Something to see the stage of the quality in which your product or your company is in. How have you done it in your experience? What did you use to measure it?
Okay, so I've done a couple of things, so I'll just flick back on some of these slides here. So that was one way. So this is one type of making quality visible. So this is what we had for understanding about our process, how we did things. So we made these UX infographics that were visible to everyone, and that made it easy for people to digest. Over here, this is a weekly report we had on performance testing, right? So we tried to make that information not necessarily very detailed, but just easily digestible. They could always come and talk to us if they wanted to know more information. But I guess, so this is one way we worked on trying to make, so that you can see it's a weekly report and there's the date at the top. So working with that way. A lot of the questions, this one in the middle, a lot of the questions were around, well, what is the difference? How does a tester and a developer work together? So these teams were typically, they were XP teams who had never worked with testers before. So they did a lot of pair programming. So they had a bit of confusion as to how they would work together. So we're pairing with the developer all day. What's the tester going to do? So one of the infographics was just sort of comparing the two roles and so trying to help people understand the different focuses on what they would do. So I guess it was really dependent on the context at that point in time and trying to help that make visible. But in general terms, it's trying to make that visible early rather than waiting to the end to make it visible. Another thing that I worked on, sorry, going backwards, and I don't have a lot This is actually one other way of making quality visible at the early end, is to talk about what quality is. And then this is a great way of having experiments about, because you're focused on doing a task, so you say you all agree on what the top 3 priorities are in your quality, and then you discuss what would be the first step that you would do, and then you assign that to someone, so that you're walking out of that meeting with a tangible next step to do. And this is a great starter to be able to start working on that quality improvement process. It doesn't have to be a big process. I think we want to get away from this idea of having this big strategy. It's about working closely with the teams and enabling the teams to develop their own strategy and helping them be in control of that. So that's another way. Let me just see if I can find... Oh, I'm going the wrong way again. Am I going the wrong way? No, this one. So this one, really, one of the things that were worked on, we've experimented with doing, and it's really in early stages, so I don't have a lot of information on this. But one of the things we did was, see that one says objectives and key results. So we're looking at things like OKRs, so objective key results, which is one way of looking at improvement. So it was like, well, how can we look at what is the objective for this quality, right? And what are the key results in this? And then the next step here would be, what tasks could we do in order to be able to hit those key results which would meet that objective? So then if you give this to anybody at a senior level, they can immediately see how this all ties in together to their objectives. So what you're trying to do there is to help them think about objectives in their terms rather than our terms, where we talk about it's done and things like that. We're trying to take it at a higher level of abstraction and help them understand it, so that they feel comfortable with what we're doing.
So you discuss this with, you use this as a template to discuss it with different sections of people.
Yeah, depending.
Okay,
I mean, obviously,
combine.
You're not going to do this every time for everything, right? This is just a very generic one. But you could actually take this and, look at it. If you've got something you seriously want to focus on in the pipeline area, you could use this. I've just created this myself. You can actually develop your own one or do something similar. Yeah. But I guess the key area thing for me was, how can you actually demonstrate that what you're doing on a daily basis ties into what your organization wants to achieve? And you're going to be moderately successful. I mean, it's really hard to do that. It's not an easy thing. If you want to read more about doing that, is to read some of John Cutler's work. He's done some great work in talking about having developers focus on this type of thing. And so that they're able to sort of meet business outcomes rather focusing on, I've done my story.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thanks very much for the talk. I'm here.
Oh.
You mentioned time to release and decreasing that. In your experience, have you dealt with time to recovery as well?
I haven't a lot. I'd love to be able to, anyone out there?
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. I mean, I certainly think we were starting to head down that path, but where I was working on was in the payments industry. And so there's a lot of reluctance to try and do that type of work. What I did, though, was talk to the auditors and talk to people in the risk space and say, look, your reluctance to do this type of work in production is actually it's a greater risk than actually waiting for release, because this is this is opened up. This can of worms is not going. We're not shutting this can of worms again. CICD, it's here to stay. How are we going to be able to respond to market demands rapidly if we don't take on this type of approach? So yeah, we started the conversation, but we didn't actually get to really do a lot. But feature flags and stuff like that is one way of starting to kind of start measuring your improvement and your focus in that direction, I would imagine.
Cool, thank you.
That's
okay.
That's
the journey we're on as well, and trying to figure out.
Yeah,
because there's only one tester.
Right.
So, and we have lots of engineers. We're focusing on that to improve quality rather than actual loads of testing?
Yeah, look, and I think this is the thing, is that, I see some organizations, it's like, testing is kind of getting left behind in a lot of these conversations. We're not necessarily at the table. And I think that's a real shame, because I think there's so much value that we can offer, because we look at problems every day. We're looking at risk. We are the risk experts in our organization to some degree, right? So being able to get your foot in the door and start talking about value in their terms, it might be a way for you to kind of start getting into those spaces. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm looking at observability and looking at how can we make things easier, how observation can be made easier. So I'm going to a conference in San Francisco just to learn about that and to find out what can we do and how can we help that from how can that help us in the quality space too.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Dan.
Hello. Do you think that the language we're using and their approaches to talking about quality in general from the testing perspective are hampering our ability to talk about quality in a
it's really interesting. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's really interesting. I go in, I talk about testing, and maybe this is just unfortunate. I talk about testing, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And then I talk about quality engineering, they're, oh yeah, we want that. I'm like, okay. But, I think that's really interesting. It goes along the same thing as Martin Heine did a talk about testers, called all the testers business analysts, and suddenly they became the stars of the organization. So, it's something to think about. Maybe it's not for your organization, but certainly, it'd be interesting to see how maybe some experiments in that space. Reliability engineers are another thing. I think they are massively involved in quality. To me, they're the SREs of the DevOps infrastructure space. So I'm like, I could do that. Not quite, but certainly be able to go into that space.
More questions? All right. Thank you then.
Thank you very much.